The air was unusually still, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The cemetery, perched on a quiet hill overlooking the town of Cedar Valley, had never seen a funeral this large or this heavy with grief. Rows of officers stood in crisp black uniforms, their gloved hands at their sides, their heads lowered in solemn reverence. Friends, family, neighbors all gathered in silence, trying to process the loss of Lieutenant James Rowe. His closed coffin sat at the center, draped in a crisp red and blue flag, reflecting the colors he wore every day with pride. A gentle breeze stirred the hem of the cloth, brushing lightly against the side of a German shepherd sitting by its edge. That dog was Shadow, James's canine partner, companion, and, most of all, his shadow in every mission. He hadn't moved since the casket arrived. His gaze never shifted. But then, with no warning, he began to bark. It started with a low growl, deep and unnatural. Then a single bark, sharp, piercing. Another followed. And then another. Everyone froze. The priest paused mid-blessing. Sarah Harper, James's closest colleague and longtime friend, narrowed her eyes as she watched Shadow. The barking became patterned. 3 sharp barks. A pause. Then 2 more. It was almost mathematical, deliberate. A warning, not mourning. Shadow jumped up, planting both paws on the coffin. His claws scratched against the polished wood. He began whining now, then barking louder, pressing his snout into the seam of the lid. People looked at one another in confusion. Was this grief? Or something else entirely? To understand what happened that day, you need to know who James Rowe really was. Not just a decorated officer, but a man obsessed with justice, sometimes to the point of recklessness. Months before the explosion that led to his presumed death, James had grown distant. Not from Shadow, never from him, but from everyone else. He had uncovered discrepancies in evidence logs. Court testimonies that didn't match surveillance footage. Warrants being pushed through without cause. Files disappearing. Something was wrong inside the department, and James wasn't the kind of man to ignore it. He began his own quiet investigation, compiling evidence late into the night. The deeper he dug, the more dangerous it became. He never said it out loud, but those closest to him knew he feared someone on the inside had gone rogue and that he might be the next to disappear. The only one he truly trusted was Shadow. 3 days before the funeral, James had responded to a bomb threat at an abandoned warehouse just outside town. The tip came in anonymously, urgent, but vague. James volunteered to lead the investigation, taking Shadow with him. Inside the warehouse, Shadow had immediately signaled explosives. But the layout was odd. The wiring was old. The detonators didn't match anything they'd seen before. James had called for backup and began clearing the perimeter. Just as his team exited the building, the explosion erupted. The roof collapsed, fire engulfed the structure, and debris scattered across the block. Emergency crews arrived, sifting through rubble for hours. They found James's badge, shredded uniform, blood-stained vest, but no body. The coroner, under pressure to conclude the case, ruled James dead. The department arranged a funeral with full honors. A closed casket. No one questioned it. No one but Shadow. At the funeral, Shadow had been inconsolable. He refused to move, eat, or rest. But when the ceremony began, he transformed. He barked, pulled away from his handler, and lunged for the coffin. It wasn't just sadness, it was resistance. Sarah watched in disbelief. Shadow barked again, 3 times, pause, then twice more. Over and over. A code. A signal. Sarah stepped forward and said the unthinkable, open the coffin. The priest objected. The funeral director looked horrified. But Sarah insisted. 2 officers approached hesitantly and unclipped the lid. The silence that followed was deafening. Inside the coffin was no body, only James's uniform, his boots, a broken radio, and a duffel bag. Inside the bag, wrapped in cloth, was a USB drive and a handwritten note. Sarah unfolded it slowly. It read, "If you found this, then I'm not dead. Or they don't want you to know I am. Trust shadow. Follow what I've left. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. She inserted the USB into her tablet. A grainy video flickered to life. James's face appeared bruised, bloodied, his voice barely audible. They tried to kill me, he whispered. The warehouse was a setup. I've been tracking corruption, high-ranking officers, judges, and city officials. They found out. I was close. They needed me gone. But if Shadow led you here, then I'm still fighting. The video ended. Chaos erupted. Officers looked around in shock. The honor guard lowered their weapons. Sarah took charge immediately. She launched an internal probe and began retracing James's last known steps. Shadow was taken to the K9 unit headquarters but refused to rest. That night, he escaped his kennel and showed up at Sarah's door, collar jingling in the dark. Sarah let him in, and in that instant, something clicked. He wasn't done. He was leading them somewhere. The next week became a whirlwind. Shadow guided officers to James's safe house in the woods, where they uncovered maps, notes, and a wall covered in red thread connections between city leaders and crime syndicates. Surveillance footage showed secret meetings, payoffs, and the same judge who signed James's death certificate shaking hands with a known trafficker. But every step they took brought resistance. Files disappeared. Hard drives were erased remotely. An anonymous message warned Sarah to stop or face the same fate. A fellow officer on the task force was poisoned. Yet Shadow kept going. Day after day, he retraced James's steps. Into forests. Abandoned tunnels. Storage units. Each stop brought another piece of the puzzle. After 11 exhausting days, Shadow led the team deep into the river woods beyond the town border. There, hidden under a collapsed boathouse, was a storm cellar. Inside, unconscious and barely alive, was James. His wrists were bound. His mouth duct-taped. He had been there for days, injured, starved, but alive. When they freed him, the first sound he made was a gasp. The second was Shadow's name. James was hospitalized for weeks. But as soon as he was strong enough, he gave the testimony that would dismantle a citywide criminal enterprise. 2 captains were arrested. 3 high-ranking officials were indicted. The judge who signed his death certificate was charged with conspiracy. And the mayor, someone James had once trusted, was exposed as the silent backer of the entire operation. Cedar Valley erupted. The people demanded reform. And the one who had never stopped believing, never stopped barking, never gave up, was Shadow. James and Shadow were honored at the state capitol. Shadow was awarded the highest medal for K9 bravery. James retired from the force but became a public speaker, advocating for police accountability and animal partnerships in law enforcement. He often said he would have died, literally and figuratively, if not for the dog who refused to let go. The media dubbed it the bark that saved the city. 1 year after the funeral that wasn't, a new ceremony was held at the same cemetery. But this time, it wasn't for grief, it was for tribute. A bronze statue of Shadow was unveiled, showing him poised with front paws on a coffin, ears perked, eyes focused. At its base, the words, "The dog who spoke the truth no one else would listen to." James stood beside it, Shadow sitting quietly at his side. The sun finally broke through the clouds. For the first time in a long time, Cedar Valley felt hope. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of the fierce, loyal hearts that walk beside us on 4 legs, please like this video, share it with someone who still believes in goodness, and subscribe to Pawsitive Tales. Stories like this are real, and they deserve to be heard. Special request: have you ever had an animal stand by you in your darkest hour? Share your story in the comments. We might feature it in a future episode.